I saved this story for today so you can get a good laugh to start your Wednesday morning off. Yesterday, Trump's Secretary of Agriculture said that she wants to replace all the migrant workers that they're deporting with U.S. citizen workers who are on Medicaid. The problem with that is majority of people on Medicaid are children, the disabled, or the elderly. So he's going to have children, elderly, and disabled people picking our fruits and veggies. Now, there are some people that are able-bodied that need to fulfill the work requirements they have now. She's saying that's why this will be done, because they have to fulfill these work requirements, so they're just going to send them to the fields to pick the fruits and veggies. This is not a joke. This is what they said. Trump's agricultural secretary yesterday said this. The best and the brightest, people. Let me know what you think about this. Comment, like, share, spread the word, and I'll see you back here for the 411.
When you think about, there are 34 million able-bodied adults in our Medicaid program. There are plenty of workers in America.
So if you want to be on Medicaid, be prepared to go work in the fields. That is what they're saying now.
Where the president stands in his vision for farm labor, the first thing I'll say is the president has been unequivocal that there will be no amnesty. And
they're making it very clear. They're going after all the undocumented farm workers, which means there won't be people to pick up crops in the fields. There won't be people to help with crop management. Farm workers are going to be deported. And their solution is, if you are somebody who is receiving Medicaid, you're going to need to go work in the fields. Now, that was Pazuzu. She is the Secretary of Agriculture, and she's saying that the 34 million able-bodied Americans who are on Medicaid need to get up and go to their local farm and start picking some crops after they deport the people who have been doing these jobs. But the biggest problem here is most Americans are not applying for those jobs. Most Americans don't want to do them. 2/3 of farm workers are people who have immigrated to the United States.
2/3 of crop workers are foreign-born. And while many come to the U.S. for seasonal jobs legally through H-2A visas, the USDA estimates that 42% of crop laborers are undocumented.
Now, I don't know what they're planning on doing here, because the only way it would be feasible that Americans who are receiving Medicaid will automatically have to go work on a farm is the application process would have to be done at a farm. Because let me apply for Medicaid through the online website and then they say I need to report to a farm. I'm just not going to show up. What? If you've ever applied for health insurance, you can do the whole process online. Medicaid is the exact same thing. And I think people don't understand that Medicaid is not a check that you receive. Medicaid isn't free money. You're doing mountains of paperwork to just receive basic medical care, and the money for that medical care you never see, you never touch, you never even experience, because it goes directly to your medical care team. But y'all are expecting Americans to go work on farms. Okay, good luck, girl, with that, because these farms are all in red states, and this is going to affect y'all more than anybody.
Let me get this straight. So Trump's agricultural secretary just said she wants to deport undocumented farm workers and replace them with able-bodied adults on Medicaid. What in the 1930s chain gang is this? So Brooke Rollins got up on stage like she was unveiling the next iPhone and said, "We're going to use automation and American participation." Then said there are 34 million able-bodied adults on Medicaid we could tap into. Excuse me? Tap into how? Like, y'all going to draft poor people into picking strawberries now? What are we doing? So you deport the people who actually know how to harvest food, then go, "Oh, don't worry. We'll just make sick and low-income Americans do it. Not train them, not pay them well, just make them do it." Ma'am, that's not innovation. That's a labor camp with extra steps. So she says 34 million people on Medicaid are able-bodied. Let's just unpack that right quick. Except that number includes parents, caregivers, and people who are already working. Also, newsflash, being on Medicaid doesn't mean you're lazy. It means you're broke, or sick. So unless this plan comes with sunscreen, insulin, childcare, and a union contract, it's not a solution. It's exploitation. So here's the question. What kind of government deports the experienced workers, then says, we'll just replace them with poor people who can't say no? Is this about feeding the country or controlling labor? Because if the Trump administration gets its way, you better believe food won't be the only thing getting picked. Now that's for damn sure.
Now, in recent months, a striking paradox has unfolded in America's agricultural history. Many white farmers, particularly those in the southern and rural Midwest states, are facing labor shortages. These people are people who overwhelmingly voted in Donald Trump. They now face an intensifying labor shortages. The logic is simple. Donald Trump voted in. Donald Trump promises deportation at any cost, and he has lived to his word that he is going to deport at any cost. Now, those people who are working in these white farms are now being deported. Some are scared and are in hiding, right? So there's an increasingly labor shortage for these white farmers. Now, this crisis is fueled by the growing unwillingness also of both Black Americans and immigrant workers, especially from Latin America, to work under exploitative, underpaid, and often racially hostile conditions on their farms, right? So these white farmers did not just vote Trump. They are hostile, they are racist, right? They underpay. These farmers, many of whom embraced Trump's hardline immigration rhetoric and anti-labor policies, are now grappling with the repercussions of their very choices of voting in Trump, right? Birds of the same feathers flock together, right? And now Trump has just taken them to the wrong direction, and the thing is falling down, the train is falling. And also remember, Black Americans have long worked in white farms since the slave trade history times, right? They have shared their ideas of why they don't want to farm. They are sharing their side of story. I want us to listen to them, get to understand what they have to say, and then I shall get back by the end of the video, of course, where we shall also have a deep critical analysis. Let's dive in.
America has never lacked labor. It just always had a very clear idea of who should be doing it. The fields, the factories, the kitchens, the care work, always someone else's job. And now, according to our Secretary of Agriculture, that job should go to Medicaid recipients. Not because they volunteered, not because it pays well, but because in the eyes of power, the poor are disposable, and poverty is now a work assignment. Recently, the Secretary of Agriculture suggested that immigrants being deported from this country will be replaced on farms by Medicaid recipients. Let that sink in. We're now saying if you are poor, you work. If you are sick, you work. If you are disabled, an elderly, or a veteran who served this country and now relies on public health care, you work. Not because it's a calling, but because your life, your value, is reduced to whether you can produce cheap labor. For food you may not even be able to afford yourself. This isn't policy, it's punishment. It's the reincarnation of an old American idea that certain people were born to serve, and if they can't serve willingly, then the government will assign them value. Let's be real here. We know who she's not imagining out there in the fields. She's not thinking of white mothers in rural Ohio. She's not thinking of Vietnam vets who've spent decades battling PTSD. She's not thinking of your grandfather on oxygen or your neighbor recovering from surgery. But when she says Medicaid recipients, she wants you to picture a black or brown face, a poor person, someone else. This is not about labor. This is about lineage. This is about who America has always considered the help. And now that immigration is being restricted and borders are tightening, they're looking inward and they're asking, who's left to exploit? But here's the irony. The people they want to push into those fields are the same people who built the country in the first place, who fed America, who picked, planted, and processed without dignity, wages, or thanks. And we are not going back. This isn't just a cruel policy suggestion. It's a reflection of how far the political mind has strayed from compassion and logic. Because if they truly cared about labor shortages, they'd reform immigration, they'd raise wages, they'd offer health care, housing, and safety. But instead, they punish the poor for being poor, and they punish the sick for being sick. So the next time someone in power suggests that Medicaid recipients should work the farms, ask them, which ones? The single mothers in trailer parks? The white veterans on disability? The 74-year-old widower in Alabama? Because if you're going to assign people to the fields, don't pretend it's about fairness. Call it what it is. Modern day indentured labor, dressed up as policy. And let me be clear, we've picked enough. We've bent our backs for centuries, and we are not going back to the fields for anyone's political fantasy.
I think everybody needs to get on the same page when it comes to government assistance, because some people have seen to make a lifestyle out of being on government assistance. I want everybody out there to know you do realize Medicaid, EBT, any kind of government assistance is not designed to pay for your poor choices. You are the one who laid down having baby after baby after baby. The government is not responsible to take care of your children. That is your responsibility. I keep seeing people, I don't know what side of TikTok I must have landed on, because I keep seeing people talking about they are low income, as if that is an excuse to keep procreating. If you know you're low income, why do you have 3 children? You knew you were in low income when you had 1 child. Then you had 2. Now you got 3, so that you can end up with more Medicaid and more EBT benefits. This really needs to stop. The American taxpayer should not have to pay for the bad decisions of others. The American taxpayer should not be punished because somebody else does not want to get up and go to work. I've said this before. I'm not somebody who never thinks that anybody should ever be on Medicaid. I think there are exceptions. If you are a disabled person who is physically unable to work, if you're a senior citizen, you need Medicaid, EBT, food stamps, I think that you should be able to get those services. But if you are an able-bodied person, you should not be making a career out of being on Medicaid. You should not be on Medicaid, EBT, food stamps, any other kind of government assistance year after year after year after year.
Anybody?
Jim Jordan is trying to claim that it's not immoral to force people on Medicaid to go to work. Look at this.
If there's an able-bodied adult out there now who is in our welfare system, guess what? That person's going to have to work. That is fair to taxpayers. That's good for our economy. Maybe most importantly, that's actually good for that recipient, for that.
But he's leaving out the part that most people on SNAP or other government assistance programs do work, oftentimes multiple jobs. This issue is not about laziness, it's about low pay. Also, able-bodied doesn't mean they don't have any challenges. Many of these people are caregivers, have undiagnosed disabilities or undiagnosed mental illnesses, or they just simply have limited access to transportation or childcare. See, work requirements sound good on TV, but in reality, they usually kick people off of their benefits and don't help them find a job at all. A study conducted on Arkansas's Medicaid work requirements showed that 18,000 people lost their coverage and there was no boost in employment. This isn't about encouraging work. This is about gutting safety nets under the false pretense that these people are gaming the system. So no, Jim, it's not far from immoral. It's very immoral to punish people for being poor or struggling.
Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins just dropped the most dystopian work plan since the company town. Just this week, Secretary Rollins said we can replace all the immigrant farm workers with, wait for it, people on Medicaid. Because apparently having health insurance now makes you eligible for manual labor conscription. She literally said there will be no amnesty, the mass deportations continue, but in a strategic way. We move the workforce toward automation and 100% American participation, which, with 34 million able-bodied adults on Medicaid, we should be able to do fairly quickly. Yeah, you know what I love about this plan? The sheer audacity of it. They've managed to turn healthcare into a draft notice. Congratulations, you've been selected for our new program, Medicare to Migrant Worker. Step right up, Grandma. Time to pick the strawberries. Your arthritis medication depends on it. And they call it strategic deportations. Strategic, like there's some master chess game happening here. Well, we can't deport them all at once. That would crash the food supply. We need to do this strategically. You know, one abuela at a time. Here's the beautiful irony. They're complaining about 34 million people on Medicaid, while simultaneously creating a system that ensures those same people will need even more medical care from working in fields all day. It's like a self-perpetuating healthcare industrial complex, but with more sunburn and fewer benefits. They're essentially creating the ultimate gig economy job. Work the fields to keep your health insurance, but good luck accessing that insurance when you're too exhausted from picking tomatoes to make it to a doctor's appointment. Now, most of these so-called able-bodied Medicaid recipients are already working. They're just not working hard enough, apparently. Because nothing says American dream like forcing people to choose between healthcare and dignity. Hey, at least we'll have the freshest produce picked by the most medically insured workforce in history, assuming they can still afford the insurance after working for agricultural wages. Make sure to follow me on all the other networks and like, share, and comment below to let me know your thoughts. Stay vigilant. Be loud.
But I can't underscore enough. There will be no amnesty. The mass deportations continue, but in a strategic way, and we move the workforce towards automation and 100% American participation, which again, with 34 million people, able-bodied adults on Medicaid, we should be able to do that fairly quickly. Thank you.
Bold plan coming from the U.S. Farm Secretary. Guess we're not going with Trump's whole migrant slavery thing? Doubtful, but okay. Couple of problems with that whole statement, however. First, I do find the order of operations interesting. I guess we're prioritizing automation over American jobs. Gotta really keep an eye out for those robots. That sure makes the cruelty worth it. Number two, and this one's a big one, there aren't 34 million able-bodied adults on Medicaid. Ugh. There are around 38 working age adults on Medicaid. So it's close. That is setting aside all the children and the elderly on Medicaid. And of those 38 million working age adults, 14 million of them are classified as disabled. That means they're also receiving disability benefits. And as we know, many people with disabilities do not actively receive disability benefits. And if they're not counted. Around 10 million of those adults have children. If you know anything about the nuclear family in America, you know that childcare is incredibly expensive, which means that often at least one of the parents has to either stay home or take only part-time work to make sure that someone's at home making sure the kids stay alive. Something they're pretty bad at doing until they hit a certain age. Bringing us to a grand total of around 14 million able-bodied adults without dependents or children. Of those 14 million, around 10 million either worked at least 80 hours a month or were on Medicaid short-term for just a couple of months out of the year, which means that the vast majority of them received Medicaid short-term, likely because they were either between jobs or because they received fewer hours at work for a month or two due to an injury, illness, or just their hours got cut, leaving a grand total of around 4 million working-age adults without children or dependents who work fewer than 80 hours a month. And yes, that does include anyone who works 79.5 hours in a month. And don't forget, that also includes anyone with a disability who is not also actively receiving disability payments. This also includes pregnant women, by the way, and anyone below 65 years of age. So a 64-year-old would qualify. I don't know. That kind of sounds like slim pickings for farm labor, but I guess that's why you're pulling another 30 million from the other categories, including disabled, elderly, and children. And then you gotta hope they're local to the farms, or are we just picking them up off the street and transporting them somewhere else to force them to do things like we're doing for the migrants? It sounds like another great plan for indentured servitude from the right.
What Brooke Rollins just said, which is that they're gonna replace the migrant farm workers with AI and Medicaid recipients, I mean, that is about to have thousands of far-left lunatics' heads go pow. Now, I gotta tell you something. If you weren't such heinous anti-Semites, I would so be on the path with you, because I think that is gross. I think the farm workers and the people that are trying to build the houses here in Los Angeles where it's like you can't find anybody, that's really upsetting, because these are always wonderful people. And having lived in Mexico for a while, wonderful, wonderful people. But because you're such heinous anti-Semites, you're calling in such big karma on all of your causes. That's why something like this is happening. It's called the karma boomerang. These are the people that were saying online, happy that those kids drowned because of who their parents voted for, who are also going to go vote for that schmuck Mamdani.
Where is MAGA when you need them? Nowhere to be found. MAGA, look, here's a Florida farm that needs employees. You said you wanted your jobs back. Look at all these jobs. You see all these trucks that's parked over here and all these crops. All these crops, vegetation, and fruits that's planted in Florida, which is a red state, by the way. Do you notice there's nobody on these fields? Take a very close look. No one is on these fields. You said you wanted your jobs back. Now you got your jobs back. Now get to work. Okay? And they'll say, well, what are you saying? People should just run around and be illegal in America? No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is the people who had their documentations and had a chance to get their self on the right side of the law, why didn't you give them a chance instead of chasing them down, dragging them out of schools, graduations, out of their homes? Why didn't you give them a chance so they could go through the system, get documented, and work in peace? That's all we're saying, okay? Because I know a lot of you will get this twisted and try to twist stories and tell, well, you want to break the law. No, we want to do the right thing by people. We're human beings. That's it. A lot of these people had their documentations in the pipeline to become legal so they can work in the United States. But you made sure that you sent ICE to take it away. So here's your job. Go knock yourselves out. Okay? And don't think you're going to get a pay increase from these farmers either. You still get the same pay, no matter what. You understand? Now, peace.
Will Medicaid recipients be working on farms to fulfill their work requirements? Well, U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said in a press conference that Medicaid recipients who are facing stricter work requirements under the new budget bill's Medicaid law could potentially be working on farms to replace the deported immigrants. She said that. And she also made it very clear that there will be no amnesty for migrants. Let's listen to her say this.
About where the president stands in his vision for farm labor. The first thing I'll say is the president has been unequivocal that there will be no amnesty, and I think that's very, very important. I and the rest of our cabinet certainly support that, effectuate that, and make sure that happens every single day. The second thing, to your question about mass deportations, the president and I have spoken about that once or twice, and he has always been of the mindset that at the end of the day, the promise to America to ensure that we have a 100% American workforce stands, but we must be strategic in how we are implementing the mass deportation so as not to compromise our food supply. Ultimately, the answer on this is automation, also some reform within the current governing structure, and then also when you think about there are 34 million able-bodied adults in our Medicaid program. There are plenty of workers in America.
What else is next? Where are they going with all of these little steps that they've been taking and continue to take? Who knows? I will keep you updated for sure, but some of the things that come out of this administration's mouth is beyond questionable. I'll keep you updated. Please like, follow, and share so that I can continue to provide you with content. And please go follow me on YouTube and Instagram as well. It's JMamaJams there. I appreciate you being here.
People on Medicaid don't look like what you picture in your head. I am on Medicaid. My family is part of the 3.1 million North Carolinians who are on Medicaid. And I will tell you right now, it has been a godsend for my family. I do not know how we would survive financially without it. I lost my job in July of 2024, July 12th. We are almost to the 1 year point of me being unemployed without full-time employment. And Medicaid has helped keep my family afloat because there are medical issues in my family that need to be addressed. And was not able to continue to pay for COBRA. I had very good insurance at my old job. I had a very good paying job with great insurance. And I was paying $3,000 out of pocket every month for the first 3 months for COBRA to keep that insurance. And that was not sustainable. And I had a lot of issues personally thinking about applying for Medicaid because how much money I used to make and thinking, well, Medicaid is for people who don't make much money and who really need help. But the truth is, I needed help and I had to swallow my pride. And my family needed that help, and it has been so helpful. And now I don't know what's going to happen. I have spent the past 12 months applying for jobs nearly every day, networking, interviewing for jobs, being contacted by recruiters who then ghost me and don't even show up for the interview time that they set up. The job market is that bad. Medicaid is not about people who are lazy. It's about people who need help. And right now, my family has needed help. I don't know what North Carolina is going to do about Medicaid. I know the state can't afford to fund it at the same way it had been. And hopefully for me and my family, one of these jobs I'm interviewing for lands, and that's our ticket off of Medicaid and to health insurance once again. But I know that that's my case. If I'm that lucky, there's still literally millions of others across the state who won't be so lucky, and millions more across the country. And I realize there are parts of this big, beautiful bill that will probably help me once I get a job. Like, that's not lost on me. But please understand that there are millions of people out there who probably look just like you, might be your neighbor, might be one of your best friends who you have no idea is on Medicaid because they really want to work. They're willing and able to, but they haven't gotten that opportunity. So before you shout from the rooftops that this piece of legislation is passed, just think about those that it is going to affect in a negative way and see what you may be able to do for them.
Well, farmers have entered the chat, you guys. You have got to hear this. So yesterday I told you about Brooke Rollins saying that undocumented farm workers could be replaced by people on Medicaid and automation. Well, farmers are responding and they are not having it. One veteran ag leader, Manuel Cunha, says, "We've tried this before. It did not work." He said back in the 90s he was part of an effort to make farm labor jobs available for Americans as part of the Welfare to Work program. He said nobody showed up. Or to be fully transparent and accurate, 3 people showed up. One was late, one got injured and left after an hour. Because farm labor, of course, is brutally difficult and also highly skilled. Cunha added, "We lost crops. Fruit literally rotted on the ground." As for automation, every single farmer they interviewed said, "Don't you think we'd be doing that if we could?" Automating things like picking strawberries? Impossible. Technology's not even close. Another farmer called Brooke Rollins' comments insulting, and she said, "I can confidently say that most farmers in the country either laughed out loud or were just deflated by her comments." She added, "It just shows how uninformed and out of touch some of these officials are with what food production looks like in this country." Here's a friendly reminder that almost half the farm workers in the U.S. have no work authorization. Farmers say deporting them risks our food supply and also raising our prices, which are already sky high. Honestly, the Trump administration is giving serious, "I have no idea how food gets to a grocery store" energy. Not surprising when you consider that most of the billionaires in this administration have never even been to a grocery store. Those of us who have, of course, know that we should respect the hands that feed us, and remember that if we keep deporting the people who pick our food, we're going to feel it at the store and in our pocketbooks, and no spin in the world is going to...
Now, after carefully listening to these individuals sharing their thoughts, their frustrations, and of course their side of story, it's best that we underline, or rather it's best that we go through the parts of history. We try and analyze, right? We try and analyze from a different perspective, from the perspective of a third person, to try and see what's really happening and to try and analyze what they have said in regard to what we know as the absolute truth, right? So believe me, I think it's consistent, and I think it will be empirical if we start with the history itself, right? Now, the relationship between American agriculture and race is inseparable, right? From the dark history of slavery and sharecropping, southern plantations were built on the backs of enslaved Africans. Even after the abolition of slavery, black farmers remained trapped in exploitative systems like sharecropping and tenant farming that kept them economically and socially disenfranchised. As the 20th century progressed, especially after the Great Migration, many Black Americans fled into the South in search of industrial jobs in the North, rejecting the agricultural system that had long been a site of oppression. Meanwhile, migrant laborers, first from Europe and Asia, then increasingly from the Latin America, this became the backbone of American agriculture. So we can see that agriculture started from immigrants. These are the people who supported the agriculture in America. We also had some immigrants from Europe, right? Some immigrants, or not even some. The Black Americans over there were also the major part of the America's agricultural startup, right? Because remember, the Black people were working on the cotton farms, and the Black people were working also on the plantations, on the sugarcane plantations. So what is cotton and sugarcane? These are crops, and these crops are associated with agriculture. So I believe the founders of American agricultural system in large quantities is Black people, because they are the ones who were enslaved to work on these specific farms, right? So today's labor shortage in the farming sector must be viewed through the historical lenses. Generation of systemic racism, poverty, and exclusion from land ownership have made Black Americans less willing to return from work, to return to farm work. They are less willing because of of course, the oppressive history that we had. Especially under white employers, do we refuse? You know, these white employers may still hold the vestiges of that exploitative past. Similarly, harsh immigration crackdowns have alienated and reduced the number of immigrant workers who historically took on the labor-intensive work white Americans largely refused to do themselves. You see, now we have Trump, the rural vote, and the rise of economic nationalism. Donald Trump presidential campaigns were built on populist platform that resonated with many white rural voters. Promising to make America great again, he positioned himself as the champion of the forgotten working class, ironically, while advancing policies that undermined the very workforce agriculture relies on. White farmers overwhelmingly supported Trump, attracted by his promises of deregulation, protectionist tariffs, and a crackdown on undocumented immigrations. For many, the vote was also a cultural statement, a defense of traditional America, right? Values against what they perceived as a multicultural urban elite. So this is a traditional thing that Trump was promising these people, make America great again. But making America great again means that America will be in a certain state, a state that would not be favorable to a certain group of people. Of course, we know these people are the minorities and the marginalized communities, right? Making America great again brings back the ideas of Jim Crow. It brings back the ideas of slavery, right? And so, because America was built and it was great on the establishment of slave posts, establishment of slave labor, establishment of forced labor, you know, I'm trying to find a way of placing it in a positive way. I find none, right? Because America was built on the back and the blood of Black people. I say this many times for you to understand and to have a deeper, consistent understanding, right? So Trump is just doing business as usual. It's a tradition. They got a president who was promising them to bring back the racist tradition. What do? Without even thinking, they vote. Now it backfires on them as well. So Trump's aggressive immigration enforcement, including the ICE raids, expanded border walls and cuts to temporary visa programs like the H-2A, which had an immediate impact on labor availability. Farm workers, many of whom are undocumented or rely on temporary legal status, vanished from the fields. Farmers found themselves unable to harvest crops or meet market demands. At the same time, black workers, remembering the historic and the ongoing and the ongoing farmers found themselves unable to harvest crops to meet, or rather to meet the market demands. At the same time, black workers, remembering the historic and the ongoing racism within rural communities, were not inclined to fill the gap, right? The refusal of black Americans to return to farm work is not laziness. This is one thing these white farmers have to understand. As some conservative commentators have tried to claim, it is resistance, right? It is the result of generational trauma and a deep mistrust of white rural institutions that have failed to respect their dignity and humanity. In an era of growing black consciousness, especially after the resurgence of movements like Black Lives Matter, many African Americans are reclaiming their power by rejecting exploitative labor conditions. Unlike past generations, today the black youth are more educated, more politically aware, and more connected than ever before. They recognize the symbolism of returning to the fields, right? Especially under a white employer who supported a president viewed by many as openly racist. Why would they return to the systems that haven't changed? This is a question black farmers are asking themselves, or the black workers are asking themselves. Why work for people who not only voted for Trump, but echoed his rhetoric about taking America back, right? America was great in the past. It was great when it was enslaving black people. It was great when people were working on the farms, people were dying on their farms, and Trump is promising to bring it back. So why, even if it's you, would you go back to a place where you faced condemnation? It's rare. It's very hard. You see, this refusal is also economic. Farm work is physically grueling and low paying. It offers few protections, little upward mobility, and virtually no respect. With alternatives in urban centers and online economies, many black Americans are choosing agency over exploitation. You see? Now, of course, there has to be some consequences. Now, the consequences are very evident. With insufficient labor to plant, maintain, and harvest crops, white farmers are losing money. Fields go untended. The produce are rotting, right? And supply chains are breaking down. Government subsidies provide temporary relief, but they cannot replace a reliable workforce. Some farmers have expressed frustration and even confusion. They cannot understand why the people they once exploited or excluded refuse to work for them now, right? They cannot understand that. In this reckoning, some farmers have softened their tone on immigration and labor reform, realizing too late that demonizing immigrants or dismissing black workers was both politically short-sighted and economically devastating. Others, however, double down on the same ideology, blaming everyone but themselves. If these farmers are to survive, they will have to face the truth. No economic system can function when it dehumanizes its labor force. Trust, respect, fair wages, and inclusion are not political favors, they are necessities. Black Americans and immigrants are making it clear the days of silent suffering are over. The question now is whether white farmers and the politicians they help elect are willing to change, right? Or they will continue to plant seeds of resentment only to reap fields of decline, right? So all the promises, you see, don't ever trust a politician. A politician is doing his work, and his work is to lie. His work is to give you those things that are itchy to your ears. Those things he believes that when you hear them, you'll vote for them and not even question whatever they do, right? So we need to scrutinize these politicians. We need to scrutinize them. We need to be skeptical, right? There is a man who's called René Descartes. He tells us that if you want to know the truth, you have to let go of all that which you thought was the truth. And then you start picking things that you've verified empirically and rationally that these are the truth. After you've verified, those which you've verified are the truth. Those which are left were never the truth, inasmuch as they were occupying space on your head. Trump sold these people lies as a politician, right? And politicians necessarily do not mean that they are leaders. We have leaders and we have politicians. That is something that I want you to understand. You see? This is the harvest of hypocrisy. They are harvesting hypocrisy of Donald Trump. The farmers are resisting the fields of resistance. You see? And now Trump is sowing division between the farmer and his workers. You see, when two elephants fight, who hurts the most? It's the grass that's being stepped on. That is the thing that suffers the most, right? So I hope that you've gained value from this video, and if you have, kindly subscribe to the channel. I'll surely appreciate. See you in the next one. Stay positive, stay vigilant. Yes. See you in the next one. Stay positive.